Hi, welcome back. This is everything I knit and crocheted in 2025. I'm Stella, I will be your host today, and I'm going to show you all of the 24 items I made this year. We have quite a bit to get through. I do have 4 smaller crochet items, so I will just throw them in, but this is mainly focused on knitting. I did wear a neutral outfit, so I can try everything on, because I like to watch the videos where people try things on. It's more fun that way, I don't know, I like to see how it fits. And I would say we get started, because we have some items to get through, and I am cold in this t-shirt, so I am very excited to get to sweaters already. But my year did not start off with sweaters, it actually started off with a tiny little crochet item that I made as a gift knit for a colleague of mine. So I made a mug cozy. It is just single crochets that I connected in the back where the handle is, and I embroidered some stars on it. It is really nothing noteworthy, it's not the most interesting start to the video, but I did get some pretty cheap acrylic yarn for it that I had a lot left over of, and I used that yarn to make my first kind of proper item of this year, which was a Sophie scarf, which is also not the most interesting, but I still have that here because I didn't give it away. So this is my Sophie scarf. It is blue, and as I said, some acrylic yarn. I do not remember what it is made out of or where I got this from. And I just used this to get rid of some leftovers, and because I wanted a quick, easy project to do. It was also my first Sophie scarf, so I was semi-late to the party. I did not buy the pattern for this, I'm pretty sure. I just looked at the picture and picked a random needle size that worked, and then I did increases until I was halfway done, and then I did decreases. So that was basically my first real project. This is what it looks like. I quite like it. It is a little bit longer than the normal Sophie scarf, like the bigger version of it, which I quite like, because sometimes when these types of scarves are really short, I don't like wearing them this way, where you wrap them around from the front, because I feel like I have to pull them quite tight around my neck so the knot here doesn't open. So I like the way this looks. It has like something visually interesting going on, and I have been wearing this quite a bit actually, which is weird because it's not the best yarn, and I don't know, it's just like a tiny scarf, but I have a lot of blue sweaters and stuff, so it always matched really well, especially in the transitional seasons when I was just wearing like a leather jacket anyways and nothing too warm for my neck was needed. This one worked out quite well, and I've gotten a lot of use out of this, considering it's a basic scarf and more like a getting rid of leftovers type of project. We are then moving into February already, because that is all I finished in January. Most of January I spent working on this sweater that I then went on to finish. This is my first ever proper knitted sweater somehow. I worked with this for quite a long time. I called it the seabreeze sweater. It is a self-drafted raglan sweater, and the story of this already begins way back in 2024. When I guess I started this sweater in the summer, and then from like September on I started knitting properly, as in always having a project going, and I did quite a bunch of gift knits, and kind of I didn't forget about this sweater, but it was a frustrating experience because it was such a big item and I had never, you know, knitted anything really before. I like knew how to do some basic stitches, but I ripped back especially the neck area many times, and it was just pretty difficult to do for me at this point still. And then I picked it up in the new year sometime in January, and I was a lot better at knitting by that point, so I kind of flew through the rest of this, but as you might be able to see, it did turn out quite long. I went back on it actually and did sweater surgery, because I cast this off at a shorter point, I think, and the sleeves were also way shorter, so it just looked too small. And I went back and I cut off the sleeves, and I think I just ripped back the body. I think I tried to do a split hem. I need to take more notes on this. It's like so difficult to remember what I was knitting in February. Anyways, this yarn is Drops Melody, which is not my favorite yarn. I think I said last week that it was my least favorite yarn I worked with this year, and I think it's really fun. It looks cool, and I think for the name Seabreeze sweater, this was the right choice. But it is a lot of alpaca, which I'm a bit sensitive to, and it is also really warm for me. So I don't think I would work with this yarn again. But I do really like the sweater that I made, and it was quite forgiving for a first sweater, because now that I'm looking at this close up I can definitely see some holes here and there. Like this is not supposed to look like that, but because the yarn has a bit of a halo. You can't really tell from further away. So let me put this on real quick. This has short rows. It has a lot of things actually. I learned quite a lot of techniques, which is also the reason why I went back on it so many times, because as I was going, I was finding out things about knitting and knitting sweaters, and then I wanted to incorporate them. So I started over like a billion times, but I did joggler stripes. I did short rows in the back. Did I do anything else? I mean, I did 2x2 ribbing. I knitted on 6mm needles for the main part and 4 for the ribbing. So I started up here, and then I did my raglan increases, which I would place differently now, you know, but it was a fast sweater. It was self-drafted. I think I have a good amount of positive ease. It's quite roomy. I feel like the sleeves are a bit too narrow compared to how wide the body is, but I think I already said that back then. But other than that, I really like it. I just did the stripes randomly. I got 4 colors of the Drops Melody that all like matched, and I just tried to alternate randomly, but I was having such a hard time doing it randomly, as I think most people are when they are trying to do random stripes, to the point where I at some point was on one of these websites where you can just like pick a random number and spin like a little wheel to figure out what color should go next. So that's how I figured out most of this. I did do the same striping on the sleeves that I did on the body, which was also pretty hard. And wait, like this, you can probably see a little bit better what the sweater looks like. I feel like I did quite well for a fast sweater and a self-drafted sweater, and one that took so long as well, because I put this down and forgot about it so many times. Like there were so many weeks in between all of this. So I'm just happy that it turned out one contiguous piece. In retrospect, obviously, I would do some things differently. I would make it a bit shorter maybe, but I do wear it like this, kind of. In terms of usability, I do like the color. I think it looks cute when I do wear it. I find it maybe even a bit difficult to style, which sounds weird because it's not the most out there, but there's a lot going on with the stripes already. So I sometimes struggle to find a good outfit with it. Mainly, I don't wear it as much because it is really warm and a bit scratchy to me up here. So when I want to wear it for a longer time, I would probably put a long sleeve underneath, which just makes it more warm. So it's not the most optimal piece that I made this year, but I'm still really proud of it. It's very cozy, and I don't know, it's a cool sweater. I like it a lot, and I am thinking about recreating like a proper version of this that maybe doesn't have any holes in the increases, and you know, it's a little more usable to me, but we will see. And then also in February, I finished the first ever knitted project I ever cast on. I don't know what happened to that one, because I believe I cast that on in like late spring of 2024 already, and I wanted to make a scarf, because when you start knitting, I like knew how to do knit stitches, but I had never done a project, so I wanted to start doing a proper project. And when you start knitting, everybody tells you you should do a scarf, and then what they show you is a garter stitch scarf. So I started on one of them, and I didn't like it because I was looking for this stockinette stitch type of fabric. So I figured out how to knit stockinette stitch flat, and I wanted to create a scarf with that. And I also self-drafted, obviously, because what else would you do? And I started knitting a scarf, and then, you know, a scarf is pretty long. This is my scarf, by the way, maybe I should show you while I talk about it. A scarf is pretty long, and I was knitting in this direction, so this is my rows. And about like halfway through this project, I was like, okay, I know how to knit now. I like got it down. This is a knit stitch, this is a purl stitch. And I got a little bit bored of just knitting the same row over and over and over again, because at that point I also wasn't super fast with it yet. So it was just a lot of very boring knitting, and I kind of abandoned this project for a long time. I just threw it in a bin somewhere and forgot about it and knitted more interesting things until I think also January of 2025, when I was like, I have open whips and I should take care of that. So I found the scarf again, and again at that point I was at a point with my knitting where I was thinking I should have done things differently here, but this is what we're working with right now. So basically, obviously, when you knit stockinette flat, then on the other side you will have all of the stockinette backside, all of the pearl bumps, and I didn't really like it, and also it was curling a lot because I didn't do any finishings on it. So what I did is I had enough yarn and I just knitted the same panel again. So this is 2 panels that I crocheted together on the side with single crochets, which, I mean, right now, if I were to knit this scarf, I would just knit it in a round, so I don't have to do all that. It would be a lot faster and a lot more practical too. But I do still really like this project. I think the scarf looks really good. I like the striping that I did on it. It has some bigger stripes right here, and then it has like a longer section in one color over there. And then in the middle it has 3 sections where there are these smaller stripes. And I think that's really cute. I did this with some Lana Grossa Merino, I think it's called Cool Wool Big, if I remember correctly, on 4mm needles. I also believe I knitted one of the panels twice because I was unhappy with the way it looked. But somewhere, I don't know if it's here, maybe, somewhere on one of these panels you can still see how much of a beginner I was when I made it, because I twisted all of my pearl stitches on the wrong side. But yeah, it's kind of cute that that's still a little mistake that's in here. And I do genuinely really like this scarf. So I finished my seabreeze sweater and my striped scarf pretty much at the same time, I think. And then I was kind of exhausted from all of the planning and calculating I had to do to self-draft a sweater. And I wanted something quick and something easy. And I originally actually wanted to make a gift knit. So I got some Cardiff cashmere and I got 2 balls of it. So that's 50 grams. And I was kind of hoping I could get like a small scarf out of it to gift away, and that I would still have enough left over to make some fingerless gloves for myself. And that is why I knitted the Sophie scarf again, because, you know, I already knew how to do that, and it's a cute pattern and it's fun to do, with the Cardiff cashmere yarn. And I knitted it on 4.5mm needles because I was hoping that way I could stretch my yarn enough to still do the fingerless gloves. And then I ended up not gifting that scarf away. I didn't really like it as much, and I didn't think it was quite perfect. The main problem with it was that I just used the wrong needle size. The fabric was still kind of nice, even though it was a little bit see-through, but that just made it very floppy, like this scarf that I have. If I put it on my neck like this, it stays there, you know, it like sticks up, while the fabric of the other scarf, the Cardiff cashmere scarf, it was like floppy, it would fall down here, and it just didn't look very good. So I didn't really wear that scarf ever, and I did end up frogging it to retrieve the yarn for a different project, which is why I don't have it anymore. But also in March I finished one of my favorite sweaters that I made this year, which is this one. This is the Maybe Forever sweater by Veronica Lindberg from her book Knit This, that I got as a gift at some point, I don't remember. But this was also the first pattern that I made from it. And I believe at this point it might be the only one that I made from it, actually. I do reference the book quite a bit. I kind of like having just a collection of patterns at home for, I don't know, when I'm self-drafting or need some yarn inspiration, stuff like that. I like to browse through there quite a bit. So I have been using the book a lot. I just haven't really knitted a specific item from it except this one. I don't know why I chose this sweater. It looked really cozy, and it is. I used the recommended yarn, which is Drops Air. And I used the brown color because I borrowed like a brown sweater from somebody and it looked really good on me, and I thought I should also have a brown sweater. This brown is a little warmer than what I was ideally wanting, which is why initially I didn't like this sweater as much, because I thought the brown didn't look that good on me. But it is one of my, or it is my most worn piece this year, I think, because it's just something very easy to throw on over whatever, really, when you're a bit cold, or I don't know, it goes with all kinds of pants. It's just been really practical, and I like the fit of it on me a lot. It was quite the journey to knit this. I did knit brioche before, so I knew the technique. I even knitted 2-color brioche. But still, like, getting back into it took me a few days. And then I remember I made some stupid mistake where I didn't understand that at the beginning of round I was gonna have the same type of stitch twice next to each other, because I was doing the last one of the row I was on and then the first one of the next row. So I was really confused about that for a while. Tried to like figure out the math behind that somehow. And then the main problem with this was actually the stitches that were picked up under the underarm here, because in the pattern it is quite many. And for me, that just turned out way too wide. I mean, I do already have quite a bit of fabric under the arms, which I like. I like this amount of positive ease, but I think I picked up like a third of the stitches under the arms in the end that I was supposed to, so I knitted quite a bit further and then frogged back on this one. And also I found it pretty difficult to fix my mistakes on this because, you know, sometimes you will like make a mistake and it is very noticeable in these brioche columns. So it is kind of hard, I find, in brioche to ladder back, but it all worked out in the end, and this is the result that I got. It doesn't have any short row shaping, which I was a little bit worried about initially, but it works out fine. I don't think it's overly noticeable. And I did relatively recently put some elastic in the neckband. In the original, the neckband is folded down, so it looks more like this, but I don't know. I prefer it when it's up like that, so looks more cozy. This is what the hem of the sweater looks like. It's just 1x1 rib, but I like to fold it inwards like that, so the main part kind of falls over it, and I don't know, it ends up looking very cozy, very cute. I did do the recommended amount of decreases under the sleeves here on the body as well, so technically my sweater is narrower than what it is supposed to be. I actually never measured if it actually is, so I might just be off gauge. But then for most of March I ended up working on a different project, which was a filet crochet doily that I made from a vintage magazine that I got from my grandma, along with some crochet thread that I also got from her to gift to her, which she was very happy about. I really liked it too. It was fun to make in retrospect. I think in the moment I wasn't having as much fun because I had quite a tight timeline somehow. I was very off gauge as well for that doily, so mine turned out really big compared to what was intended in the pattern, and I did make a lot of changes to the pattern as I went along. It wasn't much of a pattern, of course, it was mainly just a chart, but it had this really cute floral design that I ended up changing like 5 times, but it still looked like a flower in the end. And it was also my first time doing filet crochet. I really liked the technique. I used it once more later in the year, but it was also pretty frustrating because mistakes are just very noticeable and there's no real easy way to go back and crochet. So in knitting, obviously, you can just ladder down a stitch if you notice a mistake, but in crochet that isn't really a thing, so you actually have to frog back to the point. And I had to do that quite many times. There was just a lot of counting, and then the edge stitch was always different, and then like a different like type of section came in where you did a different stitch pattern, and you know, there was a lot going on and a lot to do for a very short period of time, and a very limited amount of thread as well. I was running out of thread too, but it was a fun experience. Also, making something from such an old pattern. I mean, it wasn't super old. It was like, I think around 2000 when the pattern was released in the magazine, but still I found that the pattern writing style was quite different to what is going on today. The main thing that I noticed is that you had to do a lot more thinking for yourself. I feel like today, when you have a chart, for example, even if it's a symmetrical chart, you will always get the entire thing. But for that pattern, you only got an eighth, essentially, of the circle you were making, and then you had to flip it yourself in your head and then do that 4 times total. So there was, you know, a little bit of thinking going on top of everything else. And you did kind of have to have a certain spatial understanding of where things were going to go later to be able to complete that pattern. So it was a little bit more challenging than most of the patterns I've seen that are newer, but not like particularly difficult. It might also just be because it was in a magazine and obviously space is kind of tight there, so you have maybe like a page or 2 that are dedicated to a pattern like that, and you have to fit everything on there with pictures and instructions, you know, so a chart maybe can't just take up that much space. But it was still a really interesting experience. I had fun doing the doily. Maybe I will make some curtains, filet crochet curtains for myself at some point. I would really like to do that. I haven't yet really found a window where that would work, but that would be a kind of a cool thing to do. Also a very lengthy project, so I don't recommend doing this in like 2 or 3 weeks, but making a filet crochet doily was surprisingly cool. Also in April, I completed my probably favorite process knit of this year, which was the Poet Scarf by Sari Nordland, and I made that one as a gift knit, so I don't have it anymore, but it was really fun to do. I had never knitted lace before, mainly because I was kind of struggling to find patterns that weren't that feminine. I felt like all of the lace patterns I came across were really girly, and I just didn't enjoy them so much. So I decided to make one as a gift knit, and I ended up really liking the poet scarf in the end. So I could have just made one for myself, and maybe at some point I will if I have some leftover yarn that's suitable for it. Anyways, it wasn't that difficult to figure out. There were some stitches in there that I had never done before. I remember, I think you had to like purl two together through the back loop or something like that, which confused me at the time. I needed a lot of focus for that at the time. I remember it was really difficult to have a video going on in the background that I also needed to pay attention to. So most of the time I was actually just sitting in silence or maybe having some quiet music on and working on that, and I had a really good time with it. It was really calming. I did a lot of the work on it like early in the morning, so I would wake up, I would have my coffee, and I would sit on my poet scarf in silence and work on it. I think it was really good for my brain to have a start to the day like that. So I ended up having quite a lot of fun with that project, and it turned out really pretty. And as the temperatures slowly went up for summer, I started one of my favorite projects from this year, probably the coolest thing I made, to be honest. And that is my lobster, which is my own design. This is what it looks like. And yeah, it's a little summer top. Essentially, I wanted to make a summer top, but I struggled to find something that was actually suitable for summer. I get really warm easily, which is not surprising when it's like 35 degrees out. So I really wanted something breezy. I didn't want to use merino wool. I didn't want like tight or whatever. I just wanted something where the wind can blow through and you don't get hot and that's comfy and looks cool. So in my head, I somehow came up with this. I'm pretty certain I was on Pinterest and I saw like a very boxy square shaped top. So it went more up like this here that had these ties on the side, and I thought that was cool. So I like went from there in my head, and I don't understand how I came up with putting a lobster on there, if I'm being honest. It was just there. I had never like had anything to do with lobsters in my life before. So I got some drop spell, which is a very summer appropriate yarn, mainly cotton, some viscose, some linen. And I started down here. This is knitted flat and bottom up, which is nobody's favorite, but it was necessary. I don't know. So I started down here. I did an 𝗙𝗡𝗡𝗏 cast on, and then I have like 3 stitches on the side here that are part of the 𝗙𝗡𝗏. And then this is where the color work starts. So you knit it back and forth, and you put the lobster on one side, and then there's some decreases over here, obviously. This is just straight, and then you do decreases for the straps up here. So this is what it ends up looking like, and for the back that's just essentially the same panel without the lobster. I was thinking about making the back panel less wide so you could have more of a slit here, but I do like the way it ended up looking with this. It's just enough really for a little peek through, but you know, it's not incredibly revealing or anything like that. And I don't know, the lobster looks really cute. I sat a long time on that color work chart trying to figure out how to make it look like a lobster, because as I said, I had no idea about lobsters. So I was looking at a lot of pictures of lobsters and how to make his little legs fit over here without it looking disproportionately small, but still the lobster being on the side of the top, because I didn't want to put it down the center for some reason. There was a lot of planning that went into this, and I mean, I had self-drafted before, and there was nothing incredibly new to me in this pattern. I had done 𝗙𝗡𝗏 before, I had done all kinds of decreases before, I had done color work before, but still like coming up with all of that yourself and putting it into one piece actually required quite a bit of effort. I remember doing this cast off here in the middle, and I think I knitted that like 4 times because I don't know, I kept doing it wrong, and then I realized I should do it from the wrong side so then it looks prettier from the front. All kinds of little thoughts went into that, and then while I was working on it, I already thought, you know what, I should write down a pattern for this because I'm self-drafting quite a bit. It would just be fun to have instructions to properly recreate this item if I ever wanted to. And I didn't always keep track of what I was doing with self-drafting, but I would like keep track in my notes app on my tablet and just like write down bullet points of what I was doing. It wasn't a proper pattern, and you know, as I kept going, I kept changing things and crossing things out and writing things over them in a different color, and it's not the most practical pattern to work from. So I thought, okay, we'll sit down once and I will write down a proper pattern for this. And it was kind of just a fun thing to do for myself. And then I thought, you know what, if I'm already writing it down, I might as well just put it on Ravelry. Nobody's gonna care about it anyways, but it could just be there, you know. It's like, it's a fun thing. I like it. I would like to share. So I took a day or two and did some design work to actually make the pattern look pretty. And I did put it on Ravelry, and then something very unexpected happened and a lot of people liked it and were pretty excited about this. So this was like a very unexpected hit, but I'm gonna be honest, I get why I think it's really cool too. I don't know how I came up with it, but I did, and it's fun. I ended up taking this to a little bit of a beach vacation, like on the North Sea, later in the year, and it was really cool. I wore it a lot there. It just fit in perfectly, and I don't know, I'm very proud of this. I'm very happy about this. I didn't plan for any of that to happen with it, but it's also one of my most worn pieces this year, I think. In July, I ended up finishing 3 projects, the first of which won my worst outcome project last week, which I get why. This is a pair of socks, my first ever pair of knitted socks. And I don't even know how to tell this story. Basically, I was in a yarn store and I saw this sock yarn, and I thought it looked really cool in the skein, so I brought it home with me and I thought, I'm gonna make a pair of socks. So I followed a tutorial by 𝗙𝗛𝗡𝗏𝗏, which, again, there's nothing wrong with the tutorial. It was very helpful. I'm sure you can have a good outcome with it. I did not. That was entirely my fault. Anyways, I followed this tutorial and I made like half a sock. This sock, as you might be able to see. I did knit it on magic loop, and you can very definitely see a line here because at that time I was still working with an interchangeable needle set that had very stiff cables, so I was struggling quite a bit with the process of knitting this up. My needles kept unscrewing themselves and the yarn kept getting stuck there, and the cable was just too thick to properly bend around the magic loop thing, so I don't know, it was very difficult, and you can definitely see a line running through the side of this. And all of that already happened in 2024. And then I put my half sock away and just didn't touch it again for months and months and months because I was not having fun with that project, and I also didn't really like the yarn knitted up. I feel like it looks like grandpa's socks, and the fact that it is socks doesn't really help with that. So yeah, I just had them in a bag somewhere. And then apparently I decided, you know what, I should finish my first ever pair of socks. I just don't like having these open whips around that nothing is happening with. So I went and I got my socks back, and I did have different needles at that time, so it was easier. And I did finish my first sock, so that is what it ended up looking like. And then I made a second sock, and well, in between me casting on my first sock of this pair sometime in 2024 and me finishing this second sock sometime, I don't know, almost a year later, my gauge just had changed quite a bit, which means that this sock is a lot larger than this sock. If you put them next to each other, it's very visible that this sock sticks out in the end. It is also shorter somehow. I don't know. It's not really a very well matching pair of socks. And then because it looked so much like grandpa and there were so many things about it that I didn't like already, I decided to embroider this little star on it, which I'm obviously not a pro at embroidery, and I used like a very thick yarn for it too. So I don't know, it looks kind of chunky and not the cleanest, but that could kind of be part of the design of it. If the rest of the sock was cool, but this way it just looks like I'm very unskilled, and that's the reason why the star looks this wonky. Yeah, this is my first ever pair of socks. Am I wearing this? No, never really, because they have different sizes and it's uncomfortable. Am I gonna unravel this to get the yarn back? No, I don't like it enough for that. Am I gonna get rid of it? Also probably no. I feel bad for them. Like, they were supposed to be good socks. I don't know. Anyways, after making these socks, I abandoned my plan to buy skein of sock yarn everywhere I go and make a pair of socks from every place I've been to, for obvious reasons. So that's my fail project of the year, really. That this is not it, but I have it. And well, I did make more socks later on, so I did get better at it. This is my second item that I finished in July. This is my Elliot sweater, very July appropriate, obviously. I'm calling it the Elliot wrap because I did make it a wrap top, but the pattern is called Elliot Sweater by Wool and the Gang. It is a free pattern for a bottom-up raglan sweater, which is weird. I don't know, like that's a bit of an awkward construction. I did enjoy it though, I must say, which is also weird. The yarn I got for it is called 𝗙𝗛𝗡𝗏𝗡, and I ended up really enjoying this yarn. It won my favorite yarn of the year spot because it is such a unique combination. It is mainly cotton and it does have some wool and some cashmere. Does it have alpaca? I don't remember, but it's mainly cotton and it has some animal fibers mixed into it, which makes this perfect combination that looks very cozy. It has a little bit of a halo. It looks very much like an animal fiber, but is not as warm. So that's why I chose it. And for the construction of this, I really wanted a wrap top. That's where the story starts. And I didn't really like any of the wrap top patterns I could find. So I got this one because it was free. And I tried to make some adjustments to it to make it a wrap top. So the sweater is originally attached at the ribbing. So for the front piece here, you knit the ribbing once and then you do this triangle in the back and then you do this triangle in the front. That's how you knit it. But I wanted to be able to wrap it. So I did two separate pieces. So I did the ribbing of this and then the triangle, and then I did more ribbing that is underneath now and then the other triangle, and I attached them both separately. And I also have a little tie over here, so you can technically open this and then retie it if you want to. So my adjustments did work out. I did get the wrap top I wanted. It's just not the most practical thing to make this into a wrap top I've found, because this sweater, it slips off of my shoulders quite a bit. As you might be able to see, I have attached both of the panels up here at the top, which is not part of the pattern because it was so wide open here that the V just kept slipping further and further down because this kept falling off my shoulders, and it was just really impractical to use. So in the end, I ended up attaching these two panels to each other, and it is not really a wrap top anymore. So the adjustments ended up being kind of unnecessary. I could have just knitted it down from the pattern and then attached it up here and it would have been the same outcome essentially. I will say I did have to go in and rewrite the pattern, so I was like taking a whole couple of hours out of one of my days to read the instructions and put them into proper pattern words, because this pattern is interestingly written. It is written in steps and there are quite many of them, and you repeat some of them for some sizes and some other ones for some sizes, and it was really complicated to work with, to the point where I was struggling to understand which piece I was even working on. I think if you're like actually starting at the top of the pattern and working your way through it, it's kind of fine, but when you're just looking at it at a glance, it was incredibly difficult to see what was going on there, and I didn't really like the way it was written. Since I was making adjustments, I had to really understand how this was constructed, and I did have to go in and like find all of the instructions and properly write it down as a pattern. So I did do that. That was like an extra step for this. But other than that, I really enjoyed knitting up this piece. I really liked knitting it flat in pieces and then seaming it, which is such a weird thing to say because everybody always wants to knit everything top down seamlessly as easy as possible, which I get, but I had this as a bit of a travel project for a while. This was actually quite a long whip for me, so it was really practical to have everything in pieces. So I could just take a front panel and throw it in my bag and have like half a ball of yarn attached, and that would be enough. And I could just knit on this on the train or on the bus or wherever I was going. It was just incredibly portable, which at the time in my life, it was very practical to me that this was so portable. The seaming, it was quite tedious, but I found it meditative. I definitely wouldn't want to seam a lot of my items. I think it's good that that's like a once a year type of thing. But for what I was doing there, it was pretty fun to do. I did, I think, backstitching on it, which is not what the recommended method was. I don't know why. I didn't have any yarn left over, so I couldn't really do the recommended method without my different color yarn that I was using sticking out. So I used backstitching to attach all of this. It took a long time, but it was worth it very much, and this is what it ended up looking like. I think this is really cute. I really like the color too. I was kind of going out of my comfort zone with that, and I have been wearing this quite a bit too because it's the perfect temperature to me. So I'm like kind of cozy but not super warm, and this is just incredibly wearable for me. The only thing I dislike about it is that you always have to figure out what to wear underneath. Like right now, this white t-shirt, it doesn't really work, you know, the contrast is just too stark. You look at this more than you look at this. So I wouldn't wear it like that, and I always struggle to find something that will look good under it. But yeah, other than that, one of my definitely favorite projects of the year. It was really nice to do. It was so much stockinette. I think I really enjoyed that at the time too, because I was working on so many other complicated things that involved a lot of thinking. So just knitting a little bit of stockinette, flat, portable, was the perfect project to be doing at that time, even though it was July. And then for my last July project, I made this monstrosity. This is my knitting needle case, because I got gifted quite a lot of knitting and crocheting supplies from my grandma, and these supplies included a lot of knitting needles that all came in their little tiny plastic bags. They all smelled like back of a wardrobe, you know, they had been there for quite some years, and I ended up getting rid of all of the packaging and just keeping the needles, and because I didn't have anywhere to put them, they were all in a big shoebox, which wasn't the most practical. So anytime I needed a needle, I was rummaging through the box trying to find one. They all got tangled. It wasn't a fun time. So I thought, you know what, I should make a case for them. I used only leftovers that I found in my stash, which is why the size of this was kind of predetermined for me. I held 2 yarns together for the outside here. Please don't ask me which ones. I have no idea. But I held these random yarns together, which actually ended up making quite a cool effect. I would have never put those together if that was only like my choosing of yarns. And I did make a tie here, and you can like open it and unroll it. And on the inside I used like these tiny, I think 10 gram balls of, it's kind of hard to show if it's not flat on a table. Yeah, because that happens. But as you can see, it is quite chaotic on the inside of this as well. It's not perfect for the use case, because these little pockets, they are just a bit too small, and I mean, it's yarn, so the needles are just poking through there. So it's not great. It is definitely more organized than the shoe case, so it's an upgrade from that. I do want to, at some point in my life, maybe get a proper needle case, or maybe sew one myself, because that would be kind of an easy project to sew. And if it's like a thicker fabric, I hope the needles wouldn't poke through there constantly. So this is more like a preliminary solution, while I wait to at some point find the motivation to either make or buy a knitting needle case, because I have so many of them, and all of the cases I look at, like occasionally every few months this will annoy me and I will look for some, and they're always too small. I have too many needles for those, so I don't really know what to do there. But for now, this is my solution. It works all right. I don't usually carry my needles around a ton, at least not all of them at once, so I'm just at home, I can open it on a table, and at least with the little pockets in it, I know kind of where to go for a 4mm needle or a 5mm needle or whatever, and I don't have to rummage around a big shoebox anymore. So it's not a failed project, it's not great, but it works. We are only going into August and I'm so exhausted from talking already. It's too many items. Anyways, I only finished one item in August at least. That is this beauty here. This is my Madeleine sweater. This is a pattern by Pernille Larsen, and I participated in a knit along for this, which was also my first time participating in a knit along, and so far my only one really, except for test knits. So that was cool to do, especially because it was such a big project. I ended up working on this for quite a while, which is not what I usually do, but I did lose motivation with it a little bit in the beginning, or semi in the beginning. It is knitted bottom up, and for the first half of it, essentially for all of the body, you just knit this little house pattern repeat over and over and over and over again. So you already knitted quite many times in the round, and then like, I don't know, 3.5 times on top of each other. So it was a lot of the same pattern repeat and a lot of counting, and it was not that fun to do in the beginning. It doesn't fit over my claw clip because the neck is very tight. I chose a different yarn than the one that was recommended. I think this is made with knitting for olive no waste wool in the original. It's a Pernille Larsen pattern, so it's some knitting for olive wool. And I decided that this has too many holes for me to want to make this out of a proper wool, because I would not be able to put that on in any season. So I chose a more summery fiber, and I went with Drop Spell again, which I already used for my lobster topster, and I liked working with it there, so I got that one again. The gauge ended up working out very differently, so I knitted this on 3mm needles, which was kind of awkward to do because it's not the correct needle size for the yarn and very far away from the recommended needle size in the pattern. But it turned out really well. But as I was saying, for the body, you knit this house pattern repeat quite many times, up until here, really. It's just this one pattern repeat. And in the beginning, it is like a tiny bit complicated. It does have some weird stitches in it. But, you know, after you've done it like one time, you figured it out. You also, or I also at least did a swatch before. So I knew how to knit the little house, and then it was very many times of the little house and I got tired of it. So it was actually really slow in the beginning. It was never an abandoned project, I would say. It was just one I didn't ever really go for when I was choosing what to knit on. So I would do a row here or there, but very rarely. And it ended up taking me quite a while to get to the point where I had to split for sleeves. And at that point, I really picked up the pace and I finished this in one go, essentially. Which sounds weird because it's also just a little house, but it became more interesting after. So for this part, obviously, you knitted the house flat. So you split here and put the back stitches on hold, or front stitches. I don't remember which side you started with. But then you knitted the little house flat to up here, did some decreases around the neck and everything, so there was something going on. And then for the back it was the same thing. It was just a little more engaging for me to knit it flat and have to flip it around in my head and stuff, so, you know, there was a tiny bit of a challenge. And then the shoulders I Kitchener stitched together, and I actually remember making a mistake there where I did the Kitchener stitch and held the shoulder panel on one side the wrong way, so it was twisted in the end and I had to completely redo it, which, if you do Kitchener stitch, not that fun. Anyways, then what did I do first? I think I knitted the neckline here first, because a lot of people in my test knitting group kept saying that the sleeves are really long, so I really wanted to be very sure where this shoulder seam here will sit. Or not the shoulder seam, the sleeve seam. How's that seam called? I don't know. This seam here, where you attach the sleeve later. I wanted to be very sure where that falls on my body. So I wanted to put in the neckline first, and I actually really enjoy the neckline on this. It is just stockinette, but I think it looks very clean and very pretty. I used comparatively the wrong needle size. I mean, I was on the wrong needle size the entire time, but for how much the pattern went down in needle size for the neck, I didn't have a needle that small. So I just knitted this on my smallest needle, which I believe is 2.5mm, and I pulled the yarn very tight. But it did turn out quite well. I really like it. Because this is Drop Spell and this is not a stretchy fiber as opposed to what is recommended as a yarn, the neckline is pretty tight. So I do have to take my claw clip out and take my glasses off to get it over my head. It's not the most practical thing, but it fits, so it's fine. For the sleeves, I did make some adjustments. First of all, I felt like if I were to knit the sleeves for the size medium, which I made in this, that they would turn out very wide. The sleeves are already pretty wide on this, but since they don't really have any ribbing or cuff down here where you could roll them up, I really didn't want them to be too wide, because then it'll just be annoying. You will keep getting stuck in things. So I ended up knitting the sleeves for the size small. So the sleeves are also knitted bottom up, so I started here. I did pick up the amount of stitches that I needed here already, so, you know, I could kind of gauge whether that would work out with the size change. And then I knitted the sleeve up here. It's just a straight sleeve. I don't think there's any decreases in it. And then this is also Kitchener stitched together. So lots of Kitchener stitching, and I actually had to take one of them out again because I ran out of yarn. I originally wanted to do the correct amount of pattern repeats that was recommended in the pattern for the length, and I ran out of yarn on the way, and I didn't want to get more. I wasn't missing that much, but it wasn't enough. So I decided I will make the sleeves one pattern repeat short, as has done everybody in my test knitting group, so it will be fine. And it was fine, but it did mean I had to take one sleeve off and take a pattern, repeat out, and then kitchener stitch it back on. So process-wise, this knit, I would recommend it. It's a cool piece to have, and it was cool to work on it. It just, you need a little bit of patience for it, I would say. Maybe get enough yarn for it too. That would definitely help. It was a bit frustrating. Anyways, I did end up knitting the sleeves a bit short, and as you can see now, they're not the longest sleeve, but at the point when I was finished, they were even shorter. They were like here. It looked pretty weird, and I was kind of unhappy about it, and I was considering getting more yarn. And then I ended up blocking it, and I let the sleeves dry hanging down, which is not what you're supposed to do. You're obviously supposed to dry things flat, but I just put this flat, the body part, and then had the sleeves hanging down. And that helped quite a bit. They lengthened a lot, and I mean, it's still a relatively short sleeve for what I would like. It's like, I think you call it bracelet length. But it's okay, and it doesn't bother me, and since it's a wide sleeve anyway, I think it's alright that it's not super long. I have washed this one a couple of times since, and I always let the sleeves dry hanging down. I don't know if that will make them any more longer over time, but I could maybe use another 1 or 2 centimeters on them. We will see if that ever happens, but you know, it turned out really good. I really like this. It's always a piece that starts a conversation, I find. Like whenever I wear this, somebody will ask me about it. And this actually doesn't have that many projects on Ravelry, I just saw, so if you're still looking for a cool thing to make next year, I would definitely recommend this one. I would also recommend making it out of a summery fiber. Obviously be careful with the neck, it might get tight, and be careful with it not stretching out too much, but other than that, I am very happy with choosing drop spell for this. I think if I had done it in a wool, I would have not put it on in summer, and I would have also not worn it any other time because then it would have been too cold. So this was the perfect choice for me. One of my favorite projects of the year. The rest of August I spent knitting on this basic top that I finished in the beginning of September. And it is still not really finished. It's like finished for now, but I will have to do something with this in the summer. This is the Ivy top by Petite Knit, and it was just supposed to be a quick late summer project that I can cast on, fly through, recommended yarn, recommended needle size, nothing to worry about. That's kind of what I thought, at least. However, this ended up not working out that well for me. Essentially, I really liked this part up here. I think this was fun to do. I liked doing the short rows. I liked the saddle shoulder type of thing that was happening up here. And then I got to the part where the armhole is, and that's when things went south. I've had a lot of people say that for Petite Knit patterns, they always have to make the armhole bigger because the sleeves are very tiny. And I kind of had the same experience, so I knitted until I was supposed to be done with this portion up here and connect in the round, and I just felt like the armhole would sit very far up here and be very uncomfortable. So I ripped this part here and the back part of it back 1,000 times already to figure out an armhole depth that would make sense, and then also would be possible to connect in the round kind of sensibly, and that was just so difficult to do. I needed so many tries to end up with an amount of rows and stitches that would give me a good armhole depth and then like connect in the round to kind of fit my bust circumference relatively tightly without being like actually super tight. So that was the main struggle with this top. I went back and forth on it a billion times. I was so far away from the pattern eventually when I finally did it, and it still didn't end up working out quite. I mean, I don't know how well you can see this, but there is, like, the fabric is very loose over here, which obviously doesn't really have anything to hold on to. But when I wear this for a while, sometimes this here will happen where there's just too much fabric at the armhole here and it just falls over and looks weird. And I don't really like that about this top, which is why in the end I went and added this crochet picot edge here, because I was hoping I could kind of pull the stitches a bit tighter there and get rid of it, but it didn't really work. And then I was done with this part finally. I had found a way to connect in the round that actually worked with my bust circumference, and I really wanted to add some waist shaping to it because I like the way that it fit on Petite Knit's body in the picture. But her body is just very straight compared to mine. So for the pattern, it just goes straight down. There's no increases or decreases. I just knew that would look a bit weird on me because then it would be very loose around the waist here and would be at its tightest around my hips here. For me, my hip circumference is a bit bigger than my bust circumference, so that would have just looked kind of weird to me. So I did decreases here for the waist until this point, and then I did increases again for the hips, and it does end up working out quite well. I think it fits me well. I just don't find that I did the best job with increasing and decreasing here. It just doesn't look the cleanest. You can really like see where they happened, and I'm not quite sure why that is, if my gauge like became looser over time or something, but it's not my favorite thing either. So at that point, it was the end of summer. I wasn't gonna wear it much that year anyways, and I was so done with this project, so I just cast it off. And I wore it a few times. I do like wearing it underneath like V-neck blouses because I like this little bit of stockinette fabric here poking out, but not my favorite project of the year. I will probably do something with it in the summer. I don't know what yet, if I will unravel it and try to get the yarn back and do something else, or if I will make a second attempt at the same top, because I do still like the design, just I don't know if this is it for me. It's alright, I tried it, and it does have good parts, but yeah, mainly this fabric up here is, yeah, I don't like the way this looks. And then also in September, I did 2 tiny little crochet projects. One was a gift knit, and one I just did because I had yarn left over from my Madeleine sweater. I did unravel that one pattern repeat for the sleeve, and this is how much yarn I had left. So I used it to make 2 scrunchies that I have sometimes kind of put on with the Madeleine sweater. I don't wear them a ton, but I did make them. I just like single crocheted around the scrunchie and then did some triple crochets maybe, and then like 1 row with some picot edges. And that was basically it. And the other one is a bookmark. I made it as a gift knit for my friend, and then I ended up liking it so much that I made one for myself too. This is what the design looks like. I self-drafted this. I don't know, I didn't really want a pattern for a bookmark. So I just came up with these little lines that intersect and are symmetrical, and this little triangle shape on the top and on the bottom here. And I made one in green and I gifted it away, and then I made this blue one for myself. I really like doing this too. If you're starting out with filet crochet, this would be like a good first thing to do. It's very usable, it's cute. I will say you can't really see the design very well, it's in a book, but like this, you can see the lines. And I do have like a free chart for this included in the video, so if you're looking for it, you can just click that link and you will get kind of what I did. This is a vest, it's called the Cuddle vest by 𝗏𝗏𝗡𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 do. I applied for this kind of on a whim. I am not a vest person usually. I never really wear them much because it's always a struggle to figure out what to put underneath. But I saw this vest, I was like, this is cute, and it would be fun to like make a vest for once. And then I ended up getting the test knit, which I was a bit surprised about because I was applying to quite many test knits at the time, and somehow I was never selected for any of them. But I mean, I kind of get it. I had never really done test knitting before. So I saw this vest. It's a very easy beginner-friendly pattern, and I was not a beginner anymore at that point, I thought, and it was kind of a big gauge. I did this on 6mm needles. I think the recommended needle size is 7, if I remember correctly. And I decided I will do this in one day. So I made a bit of an experiment around it. I got up very early and I started knitting my vest, and I did finish it within that day, kind of like within that 24 hours. It was after 12. It was like 1 at night something when I finished it, but this is what it ended up looking like. I chose a blue color for this finishing here and a grey for the main part. This is 𝗤𝗏𝗡𝗡𝗏 Sniff by the way, which is another 𝗤𝗏𝗡𝗡𝗏 yarn, which I just wanted to try more of them because I liked the 𝗤𝗏𝗡𝗡𝗏 host so much. It did end up with a little bit less positive ease than I was aiming for, which maybe I shouldn't have gone down the needle size, but I think the fabric looked nicer this way kind of, and that was closer to gauge, at least in my gauge swatch. So yeah, I don't know how that happened. But from the pattern, the math did work out. So, but I am missing a few centimeters of positive ease here, which makes this a little bit harder to style. I do have some shirts that fit under here, especially because I did say in the beginning I have quite a bit of blue, so that worked out well. I can wear it with all of my blue scarves, and even with this white underneath, it looks kind of cute, even though I probably wouldn't wear it with a t-shirt because It's mostly alpaca, I believe, which is fine for the vest because it's never really touching my skin, but otherwise I think I would be a little bit sensitive to this, like if it was in a sweater. It was a very cool beginner-friendly project. There was nothing incredibly difficult or out there about it. The only thing I dislike is I should have tried a little bit harder with my ribbing bind-off. I think in the pattern, does she say Italian bind-off? I don't know, I think she recommends like a more complicated bind-off. And she says like if you don't want to do the complicated bind-off, you can just do a normal bind-off, it just will be less stretchy. And since it was 1 at night and I had been knitting the entire day, I was not really feeling like doing complicated bind-offs, so I just bound them off normally, and that means that the neck and the arms aren't really stretchy, which is not the most practical thing, so maybe at some point I should go back to this and do a proper bind-off on it. The body hem is fine, but that's also where I cast on. And then in October I properly locked in and I finally finished the design I had been working on since beginning of September that has been in planning since August. So this is what I came up with. This is my lille blouse, which is my second design and the first time I was like properly designing, I would say. I have like released my lobster top style pattern obviously, but as you know from the story of that wasn't really the plan for it. It was just something I was knitting for fun for myself, and I didn't really put much thought into what the process would be like, or if other people would enjoy it, or how usable it would be to other people. Whereas for this, I would say this is like a proper designing piece. The idea behind this is that your head is the center of a flower, and then I have these flower petals coming out from the neckline, and the neckline has a little bit of lace. So instead of here you do the color work with the flower petals. There's 10 sizes graded, so you can do like a different amount of flower petals depending on your bust circumference, and then you knit some more increased rows down here until the point where you split for sleeves, and then the body is just knitted straight down, no increases, no decreases, no nothing, except a little lace edge here again for the hem, the same one that you already did for the neck. And for the sleeves you just pick them back up, and then you have a little bit of stockinette here in the main color left, and then some of the flower petals again, which are just essentially the same as up here. And then I have this double folded cuff where you have stockinette stitch on the outside of it and ribbing on the inside, so it's kind of stretchy, so it does work to roll up your sleeves, which was something I was definitely trying to include. And the neckline is quite wide, but I do like it a lot. I feel like it's very fun to put differently colored shirts under this sweater, and it does have a good amount of positive ease, but I feel like for what I've seen with circular yoke sweaters, this is not like an uncomfortably large amount of fabric under the arms. I think it looks really pretty, very flowy, it fits with the design really well, and I don't know, I'm quite proud of this. This is like a lot of math, like weeks and weeks and weeks of knitting and ripping out and calculating and doing the same thing all over again to figure out how to design this in a way where it looks really cool, it's a fun thing to knit, it's usable, and I really enjoy this a lot. This is probably my favorite overall project of this year, considering how much time and effort I invested into this. It really like stopped all of my other knitting for almost 2 months, so I'm very glad to have it finished. I was very happy when I finished my last cast off, and quite proud to put the pattern out. I only have small items from now on. I don't know. I am working on a bigger piece that has been on my needles for quite a while, so that will be the first thing you see in the Everything I've Knitted in 2026 video, I assume. But it's not done yet, so can't show it to you now. I did make one hat in November, which was supposed to be a pattern too, but it just didn't end up working out. In the end, with the design I ended up with, I just thought it wouldn't be the most appealing to everyone, and with the yarn amount I had 300 meters of sock yarn, and I held it double, and I needed like all of it exactly, so I couldn't really have sensibly graded up for bigger sizes with like knitting this project with one skein of yarn, so it never ended up becoming a pattern. I think I only shared about it briefly in one of my podcast episodes, but this is my jester hat. This is what it looks like. I think it's weird, but it's cool. It's like a little bit too much maybe for my liking at least, but I'm so glad I made it. It was fun to design, even though I was mainly annoyed that I didn't get more yarn because it ended up being kind of tight with the amount of yarn I had. Basically, this is a 3x1 rib hat, which I want to do more things on 3x1 rib. It looks really cool. I really like it. And it has these little triangles down here that I attached later with a pearl on the tip of each of them. So that's quite cute. And up here it has these little horns, I guess, with bells on it that actually make a sound, which is not annoying at all. And for the construction of this, you'd think it's straightforward, but somehow it was really complicated. So I cast on down here, obviously, then this is just straight, which I wanted to do decreases and do a very different shape at first. It didn't work out with the yarn amount. I then have some short rows in the front here, so the back seam ends up actually sitting in the back and not on the top of your head. And then I have these little horns that therefore also end up poking out that way and not straight up. So that was, it needed some choice for me to figure out how to not make things like stick straight in the air. And then for these triangles, it's just a lot of like weaving in ends and reattaching yarn, but they are quite cute. I was a bit worried about them at first because they were all sticking upwards like this, but with blocking I managed to get them all to kind of stick out like that. And I really love the yarn. I picked it up from like a yarn dyer on vacation, so I don't know if you can get to it, probably not, but it has this really pretty green marling effect, and I don't know, it was a fun little project. I do have one like brown jacket that this goes with quite well, but other than that I haven't put it on a ton yet. It's like cool to go for a forest walk because you kind of feel like a little forest creature. And then also in November I finished my lumi scarf, which is also my design. It's a little white, at least in my case it's white, lace scarf with a small pattern repeat that is really engaging and fun to work. And I made this kind of because I liked the poet scarf so much that I knitted in April, was it? I just really enjoyed having this small white scarf and then I gifted it away, so I didn't have it anymore. But I thought it would be fun to design one for myself to kind of put the cashmere yarn to good use, because that's not something I buy a ton, so I wanted to have a special piece. And I spent like 4 days or something just swatching for this because I wanted to figure out like a fun pattern repeat that worked with the width of the scarf quite well. And for the construction, you just start on one tip and then you do increases in the pattern repeat already. And then this like main section of the scarf is just the same width, so no increases or decreases, and you just work this one little pattern repeat, which is actually really fun to do. It does sound repetitive, and it kind of is, but every row is something different, so there's always something going on. And knitting one of these pattern repeats takes me like half an hour, so that's kind of fun to do, to like say, oh, I'll sit down half an hour and then I have another piece of scarf. So this was actually a very engaging knit. And this is what mine ended up looking like. I really enjoy this. And I did end up making a second one for Christmas gift knit, so I don't have that one anymore, but I also used like a white, I believe Expression Fiber Arts alpaca silk lace held double for that. So it looks very similar, essentially the same scarf, just a bit of a different fiber. And yeah, very fun little cozy project. And then for the rest of December, I made a few more gift knits for Christmas. The first one is a pair of fingerless gloves that I made using some leftover drops Nepal, I believe, that I had from a different project. So I had very limited yarn amounts and I still wanted to do something cool and interesting. So I ended up doing micro stripes with the grey and the purple, which looks kind of like the same color. So you can really only see them when you go very close. And on top of that, I made a snowflake colorwork design for like this part of your hand. And it was pretty fun to do. It was kind of fiddly because I wanted to leave a hole for your thumb here, obviously, so you had to work all of the colorwork part flat and always cut the yarn for this hole here. And then I just did a little bit of like some finishings around the thumb hole, and that's basically it. No other finishings for this, no increases, no decreases, nothing crazy, just the snowflake. So that was a cute little project I did. And then I did 2 pairs of Sunday socks, which took me quite a while, so that was my second and third pair of socks then, and they turned out a lot better than the first one. They are actually usable, they are the same size, you can't see any little line knit from Magic Loop, so that ended up working out quite well for me. I had some difficulty with the sizing in the beginning, which was mainly my fault because I kind of thought it wouldn't be big enough, and I still think if you make like a properly long sock like the one that is in the picture, I might want to add some, like start with a bigger number of stitches and add some decreases in the leg part so that it will actually fit your calf, because I think otherwise that would not quite fit. But then I was using a sock yarn that I had also had in my stash for such a long time. I think it's called Samba. Anyways, I didn't have enough yarn to make 4 socks with it that are that long, so I ended up making kind of shorter socks, like ankle socks, and therefore I didn't really have that issue, and I just ended up knitting the biggest size for both of them for the cuff part, and then for the length I did one in the 39 size and one in the 43, I believe is the biggest one. So that was kind of a quick project. I ended up doing like 1 sock a day right before Christmas, obviously, because yeah, I had had that idea for so long, and then I started on it and I thought it wouldn't be big enough, so I ripped back and I recalculated, and then I knitted like 3/4 of a sock before realizing, no, this amount of stitches also doesn't work out, no, the heel is way too big. I'm not a sock knitter, I don't know. Maybe I should knit more socks so I'll become good at it. Anyways, there was a lot of back and forth, and then essentially 5 days before Christmas I decided, you know what, I'm just making them to pattern, and I am making 4 of them right now. So that's what happened there. My hands kind of hurt afterwards, but I did make them and I did finish them, I did give them away. They did work out, so everything turned out well. And that was my year of knitting. That was all of the 24 projects I have made. Thank you for listening to me ramble on about all of that. If you want to know in a little bit more detail what kind of categories I knitted from and what my favorites were and my biggest fail, you can check out last week's video where I speak a little bit more in depth about all of the stats behind my knitting of this year. Next week we will have my first podcast episode of the new year, which I have quite a few things to share. I already have some very cool plans for 2026. I have some like bucket list items that I also list in last week's video, but I did get a little bit of yarn for Christmas too, and I am already working on my next sweater design, I hope at least. I haven't really started yet. I've done some math, I haven't cast on. So we will see how that goes and if it becomes a pattern. So I hope I'll see you all again in the new year. I have many plans. We'll see how many of them I will actually get to, but I will be sharing about them here and on Instagram, and you can also follow me on Ravelry if you don't want to miss any of the new designs that are coming, and I will see you in 2026.